Hi, and welcome to our Candid Conversations with Candidates, presented by the Faribault Area Chamber of Commerce and sponsored by the Faribault Daily News. I'm Kim Anderson, Chamber President. The Chamber Board and our Business Advocates Committee are committed to bringing members in the community at large information about the candidates for elected office in our area. We work very hard to represent the voice of business promoting growth and prosperity. Conversations with candidates for City Council, School Board, and County Commissioner will also be presented in a speech format, and State Representative and State Senate candidates will join me in conversations. So now we turn our attention to our candidates for State Senate, and we have Vicki Jensen and Vern Swedin. Welcome.
Thank you.
Neither candidate is an incumbent, and so we're just going to begin by having each candidate tell us a little bit about themselves and why they chose to run for Senate. Let's start with you, Vicki.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kim, for setting this up, and the Faribault Chamber of Commerce to set this up and invite me here today. My name is Vicki Jensen. I'm a wife and a mother of three. Miranda is a senior at Winona State University. Ryan is a freshman at Rochester Technical College, and then Benjamin's in third grade. My husband, Trevor, and I live in Owatonna. We own and operate an independent insurance agency. I'm running for state senate because I love this district, and for the past 10 years I've been working on policy issues that affect the people that live there. I serve on the Owatonna School Board because I value public education, and I believe we must provide lifelong learning opportunities. I serve as legislative chair of the Minnesota Businesswomen because I believe we must have a voice in the policies that affect our lives. I serve as secretary treasurer of the Steele County Farmers Union and of the Minnesota, on the policy committee at the Minnesota Farmers Union because I believe we need to protect family farms if we want to keep our communities viable. And I did serve on the board of directors and as public policy chair of the Chamber of Commerce because I am a business owner. And I believe that business owners as risk takers need to take an active role in finding solutions to our problems. And I look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
It started really kind of innocently to run for office. I had just finished a term as the president of a 40-year-old distribution company down in Rochester, Minnesota. And I traveled all over the world and had to, work 70, 80 hours a week. And I went from that 80-hour work week to about 40 hours a work week. And my daughter came blazing through the room. My 17-year-old daughter, Sky, said, "Dad, you look bored." I said, "Well, I don't feel bored. I'm just not working 80 hours a week anymore." And she turned to me and said, "Oh, well, when are you going to do something for everyone else?" And that comment stirred me. All night long I was thinking, why would my 17-year-old daughter think that? So it stirred that emotion, that passion to say, take all the experience that you've gained as a consultant to Fortune 500 companies and local businesses and aim that at government. So about a week later, Mike Perry, Senator Perry, he and I talked for about 3.5 hours, and he had shared with me that he was going to run for Congress, and he said that I should consider running for Senate. So it was about a 3-month process to really, seek your family first. My wife is also our president of our small business company, so she works with me every day already, and it's a big decision, and it has the effect that I was looking for is that can we really make change? So as I reached out to all my friends, whether Democratic or Republican or Independent, the question was, can we really make a change? And people were convincing me, Vern, if anybody can make a change, it's you. It's what you do. You have the energy, you have the passion, you have the experience to do that. And my son, Jesse, 14 years old, both in public schools in Owatonna, which we love the community, love the area, and we all made the decision together in January to run for Senate. So I want to create an environment where small businesses do matter, that do get the policy in place that actually supports them. Right now, Minnesota's ranked 50th in the Small Business and Entrepreneurial Index. in 2012, next to Washington, D.C., which seems to me 66 square miles surrounded by reality at times. So to be next to that, I thought, well, Minnesota has to do better than that. So increasing that index value and taxing businesses appropriately and not disproportionately and really creating value is why I decided to run.
Great. Well, thank you. We got to know a little bit about you both, and the questions I'm about to ask came from our members. We survey our members over time, and it's part of our Grow Faribault initiative, which we use to help find out what the challenges are that businesses face and try to develop our programs to help eliminate those challenges. So members of that group have helped put these questions together. We'll start out with the economy. So I'm sure we can all agree that we need stronger economic growth to take place in Minnesota. So what strategies will you support and recommend for the legislature in 2013 that will make Minnesota's economy stronger? Vern, we'll start with you this time.
Well, first things first, the priority, if business is the priority, you have to look at, well, small business serves a majority of the workforce. So when people say, we can't support businesses, really, we can't cater to, corporate America, the majority of people work for small businesses. So I would like to see create a job, get a tax credit, or reducing, we're one of the few states that have a property tax on business only. And it's generating all these other revenues without really thinking about the impact that has on our local economy. So in District 24, I think we've done a pretty good job at being conservative in nature about our businesses. And right now, I just believe that we need confidence and we need commitment from the government, from state government, to create that confidence, because a lot of people aren't choosing to create jobs. They're kind of in a holding pattern because of the global economy and the national economy. But we can do better than that here by stimulating small business and not taking a lot of those macro effects into place.
Thank you.
Okay, when it comes to strategies that I would like to work on at the state level, one of the things that I've been working on locally is reform and finding efficiencies in government. We started at the Owatonna Chamber, the City Efficiency Task Force. What we were able to do is use some things that businesses have been using for a long time, like Six Sigma and Total Quality Management, some of those tools that we were actually able to create a template that could be sent out to other cities and other chambers that could be used and utilized in finding some of those efficiencies. When it comes to reform, though, we need to look at a bigger picture, because one of the things that we're going to be facing in Minnesota is our demographics. And if we don't take that very seriously, we're not going to be able to, no matter how much growth we have, we're not going to be able to solve some of those problems. So the MAGIC Act is one thing that I believe in, that I think is going to be helpful for counties and local government to be able to actually try some of the reforms. And the basis of that act is to allow those agencies to experiment a little bit, and they're given a kind of a waiver on the things and regulations that they have to abide by. They can do like 2 in a county or up to 10 in the state. And it kind of follows what we did do at the local chamber, where we went in and we actually experimented a little bit. So I know it can be done, and I would love to work on that at the state level.
Great, thank you. We're going to move to the topic of workforce and education right now. Businesses report to us that they're having difficulty finding the skilled workers they need to help their businesses grow. What advice do you have for high schools and for colleges in Minnesota to address that growing skills gap? And what legislative issues do you think need to be addressed to make that situation improve? And we start with you, Vicki.
Okay, there was a couple things in that question, I think. The first part was, what do we think needs to be offered to the students in order to enhance...
Advice for high schools and colleges.
Okay, so that part
Yep.
first, advice for high schools. We have to be innovative in how we not only fund the programs that we're offering students, but the main thing we need to do is let people know that a 4-year degree isn't necessarily the thing that makes every student successful. And we seem to concentrate on that. And we can put resources and time into other areas and into other skills that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a 4-year degree to be successful. I believe in that, and I would pursue some of that work and include some of the VOTEC type classes that kids need. I think we also don't put enough of resources into people that are also in like an alternative learning situation. Those tend to be the students that stay in the community. The kids that do well in the schools tend to leave, especially Greater Minnesota, and I would work really hard to try to get resources to the school so that they can put some of those things in the hands of the people and school boards so that they can make those things happen. The things that I hear when I was on the policy committee of the chamber is that it's the soft skills that businesses are really concerned about. So if there was a way that we could incorporate and innovate some of the things we're doing in the school to get some of those things, responsibility, the accountability. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I know that's what businesses are asking for, and there has to be a way to do it, but we have to roll up our sleeves and try to figure that out. Yeah. The second part of your question is?
Legislatively. What are the things that should be done about the skills gap?
Legislatively, it seems like in the last couple of years we've concentrated on outcomes rather than input, and we do need to try to do some things with evaluation systems. I absolutely agree that teachers need an evaluation system. A lot of people feel that school boards don't have the power currently to fire teachers if they think, and that's not true. It's up to the school board and it's up to the administration. Those things are available, they're just not very easy and very fun to do. I'm concerned about legislation with this evaluation system that the school districts are not going to be able to absorb the kind of evaluation system they're talking about right now, because you would need to increase and improve your human resource department, which would cost us more money. I'm not sure if the school districts are going to be able to absorb that, but we need an evaluation system that's based on improvement and the ability for teachers to learn from the experience and not just penalize.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Vern, do you need me to repeat that question, or do you want to tackle it?
The first part of the question, how do we embrace this new center of creating jobs and skills that match those jobs and localized education? My family and I were traveling and we saw the #1 rated high school in the United States. And we asked, well, what does that, so we had to tour. Of course, we're on vacation and wanting to go to the beach, but we thought, let's go to the school instead. And we got a tour, it was during the summer, so we had the staff meet us and walk us through. And what was really interesting that I took away from this, what makes them #1 is they ask the kids what they want, what they're passionate about, what they feel they want to be aimed at. And a lot of the 4-year degrees are aimed at, here's how you fit into a society, rather than here's how you fit passionately into what you're built for, what you do, what makes you unique. And having schools having that objective ability and even subjective ability to aim education at those localized needs. So what are the good paying local jobs in our district, and then building programs around that for the kids. And it's going to take some amount of legislation to make that concrete, to make that work.
Are you suggesting that at the high school level?
So at the high school level, having them make that decision internally rather than being mandated. I mean, a lot of what I think upsets people is the fact that we're mandated, or there's level of complexity that comes in. We may not even understand the level of complexity, so simplifying that into what makes kids want to learn, what makes them passionate about what they want to do, and let's make certain that we're aiming good paying local jobs in the area at that passion. And right now it's kind of hit or miss, so I would like to see some of that happening in our area. In our schools, a lot of our resources is being aimed at managing the shift. So the shift of $2.4 billion that's constantly be going on. In 2010, it was $1.7 billion, and then we're in business consulting, I found wherever that opportunity has the ability to borrow, they typically do. And removing that shift allows us to let schools focus on education and figuring out how to come up with short-term financing reasons. So it allows them to think more about education. And the one question I would ask anyone is, who was your favorite teacher when you were a kid? And we all have that person in our lives. Well, what made them special is because they cared about us as students, they cared about us as people, and they helped us itemize what was important to us and aimed us at that. So if our schools had that opportunity to do that, we would be a different place. We'd be a very different place. And I think Minnesota has the opportunity to become a shining light in our market in the United States, and District 24 can do that exceptionally well.
Do you support the legislation that requires performance to be a factor in teacher layoffs as opposed to the current situation that solely uses seniority as a factor for layoffs?
I do. I support it because two reasons. Organizational management dictates that people need to be performance managed to have a thriving workforce. So human resource management is just one level of organizational effectiveness. Having teacher performance being managed and really managed, not just objectively through whatever group, having that done in a very specific way will add to teachers wanting to be the best they can be.
Vicki, same question.
Same question. I addressed it a little bit
You did.
earlier, but what I want to say about it is I'm concerned that if we don't get it right, if we don't make the evaluation system something that has good benefit for the students. I've been in the classrooms with the teachers as a school board member, and they are absolutely committed to those kids. They want to do the best, and they've been forced to, because of cuts in the amount of resources that they have, to be completely innovative in what they're doing. And I totally respect that and understand that we can do some things with evaluation that is more beneficial and it looks more like a professional development and allows those teachers to get that in a way that's, you know, available to them and accessible, and that they can talk about it and use that information in their classroom. They're doing that already. I see it. And like I said, if we don't get this right, it's going to cost us money. We're not going to have the outcomes that we're trying to do, because everybody believes that we need to evaluate. At least I believe evaluation is a chance for improvement. So anytime you're talking about an evaluation system of any kind, you really need to get it right. And what is it that you want the outcome to be? And right now I'm concerned that they're only looking at penalizing teachers rather than actually giving them the opportunity to have the resources and the development that they need.
Do you think that the legislation that was proposed in the previous session addressed some of those more positive incentives, or not enough of that?
My personal opinion is I don't think that they knew. I think they're still talking about it, and the type of conversations that they've had in committee have been very contentious, and there's a big debate over what are you going to use in that evaluation system.
Sure.
Is it the student outcome? Is it how much percentage are you going to use for their grades, for testing, parents? There's really a lot of people with real strong opinions about that, and that's the part we need to get right. And that's why it's taking a while to get that. And I'm really opposed to using that as any kind of connection to other legislation. It kind of needs to be out there on its own. And other states have found that as that legislation is going through, that they wish they wouldn't have done it the way they did. So I think we should learn from that and say, okay, we agree there needs to be an evaluation system. But what do we want it to focus on, and how do we want it to work, and what's the outcome that we want?
I have one more open question about education, but I should give you a moment if you have something to add.
I do. Just like any managed organization, there needs to be a 360-degree process. So how are the students' tests affecting that percentile? Even more importantly, how are other teachers supporting each other in what development opportunities that they have? Evaluation is always the first step. Not having an evaluation process seems bizarre to me. Why wouldn't we have an evaluation process that is a 360-degree process? I think we'll move legislation through this process and come out with something that will be good for our students and for our teachers and for our parents and for our communities.
Okay. Now, we've spent a little bit of time now on education, but it's so important in so many ways. We understand as community leaders that the focus on any kind of economic development really does, laser in on education. And so I want to ask one more question. Do you have any other initiatives or ideas that you would present at the legislature that would assist this quagmire that we have in our education system? And Vicki, I'll start with you this time.
Any other policy that
Any policy, legislation you've considered? You mentioned other states that you've studied. What's out there that Minnesota should be thinking about to make steps to improve the way we deliver education?
Well, I think one thing that we need to look at, and it's been talked about and it's been tinkered with and it's been around for a while, but obviously the funding and the way that we fund the system in general needs an overhaul.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of really good people that have done a lot of really good work on this. But the way that I work with policy is, what's the intent? Why was it created? What is it supposed to do? Is it doing that? And how can we improve it? And that should be done with all policy. And when it comes to school funding, we made a decision and a choice in Minnesota that the state would take on that obligation, and a solemn obligation, and it's been proven through court cases and everything else that we absolutely believe that educating our children is one of the most important things that we can do. But figuring out how to fund that has kind of been a long road, and it was local control. We did it through property taxes. We tried that, and property taxes were soaring. They had to do something. They came up with the Minnesota Miracle and decided the state would take that over. But what happened was they took it over, and they had a trust fund that was sitting there with money, and they had this many schools. First half of what they wanted to do was take that money, divide it by the schools, and get them that money. Second half was to pass a sales tax that would make up the difference for what it actually costs for students to attend school and what they were given out of that fund. Well, unfortunately, that part did not pass in the legislative session. So fortunately or unfortunately, we were in a time frame of surplus. So we made up the difference by borrowing from the surplus to make up that difference. So people feel like now that we're in a deficit, all of a sudden our funding is not right. Well, it's been behind all the way since then. So legislatively, at the state level, what we can do is take back that solemn promise that we made to the kids of this state and figure that funding out. And that doesn't mean we just throw money at things. That means we look at what does it cost? What do we want it to look like? And you have to start from the bottom and go all the way up and make sure that when you're looking at this, that we're getting the outcomes we need. But there has to be a way, and I know we can do that.
Thank you. Vern?
Every dollar of tax in the state of Minnesota, 41 cents of every dollar is invested in K through 12 education. And it's done on an education funding formula that when I ask, so as a new face to the political world, my first question is, if it's 41 cents, well, what is that education funding formula? And I'm told it's too complicated. We would have to take hours and hours and hours to explain it to you and describe it to you and let you understand that. Well, to me, the math has to work before you start going into policy. So it happens time and time again in government, and why spending is completely out of control is because they don't do the math first. So if we're already making an investment of 41 cents of every dollar of tax in the state of Minnesota, and we're still having funding problems, that tells me that efficiency reporting systems, all of that is really not being aimed at, let's get the math right, let's get the model down right, and then we can start figuring out what the policy is that supports that. And knowing that an education funding formula where it's $10,000 on average roughly per child in the state, but there's huge discrepancies between rural and city children, up to $14,200 in city environments, and as low as $6,200 in rural Minnesota. Well, tell me where those funds, who's arguing for those dollars first, and why it isn't based on an average, and how those dollars can actually be managed well. When somebody tells me that it takes 10 hours just to understand the funding formula, I'm telling you that that is an unsystemed system. And the best organizations in the world use math to their advantage, and if we have math that doesn't work to our advantage, it's impossible to know the outcome. And I mean, it's our education system and they can't do the math. So our state hasn't allowed them to really focus on this is what we need, this is how we need to do that. So to start from the ground up is radically important when we're making such a huge investment.
Well, I can't tell you that the next question is going to be any easier. These are tough ones, and I commend you both for putting your hat in the ring on such an important race. Healthcare, how about that? There's legions of information out there on the Affordable Health Care Act, and people are studying it, and people are trying to figure out steps that they need to take. But as leaders in Minnesota, what do you think the ramifications of those changes will be on Minnesotans? And what is it that you would advise small businesses and individuals to understand about the Affordable Health Care Act? Vern, you're up first this time.
Well, Nancy Pelosi said it best when she said, let's just pass it and we can read it later. 2,000 plus pages of information that people didn't understand, but they passed a law, and now we're talking about a Minnesota exchange policy to actually support something that is not understood. I've talked to the leadership in our local hospitals in our district, and they're having difficulty understanding that, how that's going to affect their system, let alone how that's going to affect and you know, what are the problems associated as a small business. I mean, Minnesota needs to be cautious when it comes to what exchange policy it's willing to make with the federal government, because I think the federal government deficit at $3.5 trillion or 1.5 trillion a year, 1.5 trillion more than they bring in, is startling to me that we want to tie ourselves to something that already is somewhat defunct. So to have small businesses, the people that care about every employee that walks through the door and know their names and know their wives' names and know their kids' names and go to birthday parties together are being faced with, what does this mean? Because it's not just what it means to their business, what it means to their families, what it means for them to thrive in this economy. When I ran a business in Rochester for 12 years, and I watched our premiums go up 100% every few years to manage the same level of care. And we absolutely love our employees. We were one of the few companies in the state of Minnesota that we knew about that paid 100% of the policy. We had very little deductibles, and we thought this was a really super important thing, but it finally got to a point that we couldn't even do that. For the people we love, we couldn't take care of it. I think it's going to be a multiplying effect of problems for small businesses. And when the local hospitals are having a challenge on trying to devise what that means, it's going to be really hard for the rest of us to figure it out. I think the policy has to start with education and pairing people with local doctors and having that relationship so they can actually be educated about some of the choices they're making in their life first. Having preventative medicine is the best medicine, but having a system that's for everybody, I mean, we have people coming from Canada in a system much like that. They come here for major surgeries because they don't have that same level of care available.
Should Minnesota establish a healthcare exchange?
I don't believe so. I think it should stay private. I think the private sectors are going to be challenged the most. I think the second that government's tied to managing something financially, the level of bureaucracy always costs more. So why would we let something that always costs more dictate the outcome in that level? I believe in free market capitalism, period.
Same question to you, Vicki.
Okay, healthcare and the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
What I'd like to say about that is, even just listening to Vern right now, the problems that we have with healthcare are way bigger than a piece of legislation that's been passed currently. Those things are healthcare costs, how we get care, how we provide it, how we pay for it, if we're accessible to it. Those were issues before the act. What I look at is, and like I said before, why are we doing it? What's it going to do? Is it doing it? And how can we make it better? So this is a big piece of legislation that impacts everybody, but we needed to do something. And when we look at, like I said, the demographics in Minnesota, we have an aging population that by 2030, we're going to have more elderly than we have younger students. And that'll be the first time ever by 2030. So what happens is, like we were talking about, the funding formulas, even for Health and Human Services for the state of Minnesota, That's run on a formula too. Unfortunately, or unfortunately, Health and Human Services includes a rate of inflation, and so that goes up automatically, as do a lot of the ways that we fund things in Minnesota is done with the formula. So the amount of people that are going to go onto those programs from Minnesota is problematic. We have to take a look at that. From a business standpoint, understanding the problems that are associated with healthcare, I would like business to know that those problems are going to be there. We're going to have to find a way to get people access to healthcare, but we also have to try to reduce cost. I'm concerned because of the Affordable Care Act that we're going to run into problems with providers. Are we going to have enough providers? And that's an issue for Greater Minnesota especially. More people that get access to health care are going to go to the doctor more. Are we going to be able to have the same kind of service? So I believe that this Health Care Act has forced the issue and has forced us to take a look at how we're doing that. Minnesota has always been a leader in these areas and has always been innovative. We're one of the lowest cost, high quality healthcare systems in the states. So a lot of what we do in Minnesota, we could have used in that act, but we still can. Businesses have to come together. We have to communicate. We have to explain the problems that you're facing. As a small business owner myself, my highest expense is my healthcare cost. That's above rent, above everything. So we have to get this under control. And whether it's a federal act or a state act, we have to work together on this. And that includes individuals, businesses, and the government. This has to be a combined effort. I know that it's complicated, and I know that businesses are worried and frustrated because they're not getting information. I'm a producer, an agent that sells healthcare to people, and I'm trying to consult and get that information to them, and it's not readily available. But I think we need to make it work. We're going to have to. Our healthcare costs are just going to be too much.
Just quickly, do you think that Minnesota should establish its own healthcare exchange?
I think we should establish our own healthcare exchange. I think we should have say in it. I think we should establish how we want it to work. It's supposed to be private. We've talked a long time because of our inability to have access to group health care plans as an individual self-employed person. People that farm, most of them, either your wife goes into town and has a job so you have access to health care, or you spend a lot on your own individual plan. It would be great to be able to have this concept where you could join together as a group of people, just as it does in a group plan, and have access to those same rates, that same underwriting, some of those things I think will be valuable and important. But again, it's incredibly crucial that we do it right and that we include all the stakeholders, that they all have a say in how they think that this is going to work, and be able to work on that together.
Thank you. Well, what should we tackle next? How about taxes? Huh? Pick an easy one like taxes, okay? So I'm going to ask this in a very simple way. This is about business taxes. Are they too low, too high, or just about right? Please explain your answer. Vicki, you're up.
I'm up. Business taxes. The way that you worded the question, I understand that we should be able to rate our tax system. What I look at, and I know we need to have some reforms in our tax system. We have over 50 classifications just for property tax codes. There has to be some simplification and some changes done in our tax system in general. Having said that, Minnesota is ranked number 3 in quality of life. To me, that means that although our taxes can be taken apart, I'm interested in the effective tax rate. I'm interested in what are we doing with those taxes. I'm interested in, is it adding to our quality of life, or is it taking away? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about companies that need that lower tax rate, or they're going to move to another state. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about that. We have over 5 million people in Minnesota that live here and stay here. South Dakota has less than 1 million. There's a reason for that. we are doing the things, and have done in the past, the things that make it worth people and to live here and to come here. So I understand the question. As a business owner, I would say too high. But as a person that lives in Minnesota and wants to live in a special place, I understand the need to pay those taxes. And the business owners and the people that I work with and deal with feel the same way. They want to know that their taxes are being used wisely, and that they're doing the type of things that keep that quality of life. Number 3.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yes.
Vern, same question.
I'll first things first. When you go back to being ranked number 50th in the Small Business and Entrepreneurial Index, our quality of life in Minnesota is amazing, and I think that comes from our work ethic, not from the amount of tax. Had the taxes been that were proposed in over the last legislative effort from Governor Dayton, an increase of $3.9 billion, it would have made us the second highest tax state in the United States, well, next to California. So ask California how just having more money, and you can't just have more tax and spend. Ask California how that's going. I think they're like $20 billion in the hole and digging every day. We need effective leadership in place to create efficiencies. I really am cautious about using the word efficiency without leadership effectiveness. 67 people in our Senate need to sit down and agree on what are the ramifications of too high of a tax and that equilibrium about when do businesses start moving away? When do other markets that start promoting business and having with unemployment at 8.1% or 8.6%, something like that, throughout the national rate, there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to go out and make a decision on where they have active opportunity to employ people. And again, I love Minnesota. My last name is Swedish, like Swedin, so I can't go anywhere else, so I'm stuck here. And the fact is that my great-grandfather moved here from Sweden to be a farmer and started a small business. And I've watched that business that I was in when I was a kid, I watched that entire market decline until it was almost non-existent, and that's just the construction trade. Having the economy that allows people the confidence to actually grow and build and buy homes and have kids and buy cars and do all those things comes from an economic climate as well, because having that confidence will stimulate that. We need to stimulate tax breaks and tax opportunity and real effectiveness in leadership by figuring out how could we possibly, as a state, get rid of 10% of our overall budget and not affect anyone. And that's called efficiency. You can take items in corporate America, and I've worked on programs like this with companies to where they've had soft cost that outweighed the value, such as I bought this item that was $1. I bought it from somebody because they lacked automation and services and systems. So I called them, they faxed in an order, I approved their purchase order, I got it all back. I sent them an accounts payable document, they are now in the accounts receivable. I send them a check, I have to reconcile my checkbook. That $1 item cost $131. Well, what do you think government does with that? I mean, if government is an unsystemed system, and think of the cost. Maybe it's double. Maybe it's $200 to buy something for $1. We saved one of these companies here in the state of Minnesota, a Fortune 500 company, literally hundreds of millions of dollars just by building an effective process that did create an efficiency and that was a systemed system. So less taxes says that we cinch the belt, we figure it out, and we do it more effectively. So I'm all for lower taxes.
Quick tax-related question. What is your view of the taxation of internet and catalog purchases, Vern?
There's 800,000 people roughly that work in the retail environment in the state of Minnesota. And of those 800,000 people that compete for business every single day are at a disadvantage of it's on average 7.98%. A tax disadvantage from people doing business online. And I know this isn't really a new tax. It's not even an augmented tax because it's already on the books that if you spend over $700, you as a taxpayer spend over $700 online, you're supposed to self-report. Well, I doubt that's happening at the level that it's happening, and without that effectiveness, it seems to make no sense whatsoever. So either all of us play, let's repeal that law, and all of us in the United States play at that, but having 31 states that do have an online tax and then other states that don't, including Minnesota, it creates an unfair advantage for the people that own property, that employ people, and pay sales tax on the products that are in the state. And it's about $160 million that doesn't hit the budget because of it.
Vicki, same question.
I believe that this is actually something that will have to be tackled at a federal level because of some of the things that we're talking about. I know local business owners have talked about this, especially if they're at a disadvantage, and it's concern to them, and that makes sense. I understand that. We should have a level playing field, and if we can do that and come up with something, that's what we should do. I would like to say one other thing, that what businesses that I work with and have talked to, that they're not as worried about the tax rate as they are about the stability of the tax that they have to pay, especially when it comes to property taxes and some of those types of things that they're never sure what it's going to do. So if we want to do this and do it right, we need to make sure that our revenue stream is reconciled and done in a way that we can find some stability and people can have that comfort that they can go ahead and get that confidence. So I don't know if we need to concentrate on the tax rate as much as we need to concentrate on how are we collecting revenue and make it stable.
Very good. Well, there are a lot of issues that are important to our members that we didn't have a chance to discuss. We're going to wrap up in just a minute here. I hope people will take the time to become more involved in the races and attend forums and participate in activities that help them become more knowledgeable about the issues and the candidates. So as we conclude now, I'll give you each a couple of minutes to address any topic that you maybe wanted to talk about that hasn't come up yet today. And Vern, we're going to start with you.
First, just thank you again for having us here. This is great. I know we both Vicki and I, care immensely about our state and our local district. And, you know, the high respect politics is definitely the best way to go. I am certain that one of the conversations that are going to keep coming up is property tax. Under the new property tax information that has been passed, it's actually a 1.6% decrease. When you look at the dollars that have gone in that support local government on that rebate, the homeowner's credit, what's interesting about that, 9 out of 10 times it was always done wrong. So it needed to be changed, it needed to be fixed, and so they say, oh, that homeowner tax credit is gone when it's actually now we have a homeowner tax exclusion, which net is a 1.6% decrease, and I want people to be fully aware of that when it comes to homeowners. And there's all sorts of things that we need to change. Property taxes on farms for acreage have been pretty high when we look at costs. But in 2010, under DFL control, it was an increase of a little over 12%. The increase that was done through a GOP-led group was at almost 2% less than that. So look at the facts, know the information, and a kid came to me and told me, he said, hey, I like your name, it's cool, it's Vote for Vern. I thought that was clever. He was a cute kid. I was like, I'm going to keep that. So thank you, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you, Vern. Vicki?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you again for having us. I'm Vicki Jensen. I'm running for state senate because I love this district, and I've been working for the past 10 years on public policy issues that affect the people that live here, and I want to take that to the state. It's interesting, Vern, I know you stated that it's a decrease on the homestead credit, but actually the farmers, and especially in greater Minnesota, some of them faced a 20% income or property tax increase because of that. I want you to know that the things that I'm interested in are innovating and improving education to keep us competitive, in strengthening local business to keep us economically viable, and to work on inspiring efficiencies in government to keep us honest with taxpayer money. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that I've talked to throughout the district and for sharing their time and their comments and concerns with me, either at events or at the door. I hear your frustration. I understand that you feel like no one's doing anything and that we need to work together. And what I can tell you is, I know we can do this and we can work together, but the only way to do it is to start figuring out solutions to the problems people are facing and not pointing fingers. Problems like values of our homes that are lowering and our property taxes that are increasing, stagnant wages, increases in healthcare costs, trying to save for your retirement, trying to pay for an education, and just basically trying to provide for your family. I reject the idea that those problems are caused by business owners, by teachers, students, seniors, union workers, state workers, and just anybody that's working really hard to try to provide for their family. I believe in Minnesota and I believe in the people that live here, but I believe that you need someone who's going to look out for you in St. Paul. I'd be honored to be that person and to work hard for you and your family. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you, Vicki. So this is Vern Swedin and Vicki Jensen. They are our candidates for State Senate. I invite you to listen to FCTV for more broadcasts about local candidates. And the broadcast can also be seen on the Chamber website and on the website of our sponsor, Faribault Daily News. I'd like to thank FCTV and TLT Productions for making this possible. And I remind you, get out there and vote. Thank you.